You've done the thing that nobody else seems able to do, which is actually do one-on-one conversations with ISIS. And I guess let's just cut to the chase. What is the bottom line? What do these people seem to want?
Well, let's start with the fact that there are a huge range of people who are fighting for ISIS with a vast range of backgrounds and, of course, a range of motivations. So the people that I was speaking to in detail were actually in Iraq. They were Iraqi Arab Sunni young men, and they'd been caught and they were in prison in Kirkuk in northern Iraq. So I was able to interview them at length because they were in prison. And they were very similar to each other, the few I met, and then I found later they fit a typical profile, which was young and poor and low level of education. Most importantly, their age put them at the point that they grew up under the American occupation, and they were all of them very, very angry about that. They had grown up in a time of great insecurity, no safety at all, curfews, people they knew dying, people they knew fighting, and many people they knew going to prison. So many of them had absent fathers at a very crucial time, either to death or prison. The Americans rounded up an awful lot of the young Sunni Arab population.
Harrison with you. We are talking to Lydia Wilson. She is a research fellow for the Center of the Resolution of Intractable Conflict, Harris Manchester College, University of Oxford, with us right now in the middle of the night for her in London, and we're talking about ISIS. She's had a one-on-one interview with some of the members of ISIS to determine what it is they want and what their grievances are. Something conspicuously missing, it seems, from our news cycle are their grievances, though thankfully The Nation magazine has published an extensive article, and you can just Google her, Lydia Wilson, and a lot will come up and you'll be able to read extensively what she's written. You know, we see Lydia, let's just take Cuba, for instance, a place you've been able to travel to for many years. We're just almost at the cusp here in the U.S. of going to Havana without being a communist or a terrible person. And when we basically cut them off around 1959 and said, and have a nice day, by the way, no food or medicine for you, Missy, the Russians came in and said, how about some food and medicine? And so they ally with whoever's going to offer some relief. And it sounds, and again, in America, we always have to disclaim and preface, we're not saying that ISIS is good here, but ISIS is offering, much as, let's say, Hamas, a little food and medicine. And so when people are desperate and starving, they tend to go where there's some relief. Is that a fairly true statement?
They're not offering a safe haven. They're being bombed all the time now. So it's not so much about food, it's about the security of children. This is why we're seeing a huge exodus of refugees.
We broke up the signal there, and I know you do need to run and take your evening nap, because it's only a nap if you wake up on the other side. That's why it's a nap. So we're going to be gracious here. But you broke up a little bit there. You were mentioning Syria, which, of course, is a totally relevant connection here. Would you mind repeating that again?
So I was just saying that they are living under a war zone. So the people in the Islamic State are now experiencing a lot of airstrikes, a constant bombardment, especially, of course, since Paris. Hollande upped the airstrikes by an enormous amount. And so although ISIS has offered some money and employment to people, and that can be attractive to some people, right now they're not offering much of a safe haven. It's not somewhere to flee to.
Is there anything the West could do to dial this thing back so that the aggressive side of it doesn't need to mature, but that the actual people that are joining this thing would feel satisfied enough to not have to join this thing?
There are things we can do. It's all very long term. And this is something that we have not been very good at doing, planning these long term strategies. And the short term strategies that people are coming up with are military. And although these can work to a certain extent, you know, we can, if we all get together as President Hollande of France wants us to do, we can probably pulverize the Islamic State as it is now and gain a short-term victory. But as we know, bombing civilians works very effectively to radicalize civilian populations against the aggressor. And so long term, what the West really needs to be doing is working on alternative visions and reasons for being excited and invested in life. We are not offering our young anything like as exciting as the adventure of building a new state and sacrificing your life for the chance to do this. As teenagers can be very, very idealistic, and they're not finding anything to pin their ideals on in the West.
Yeah, it would be helpful if the West, some of our governments, let's just say mine, decided that the mammals roaming around here, we call them voters, consumers, citizens, whatever you want to call them, were somehow valuable. Give us a little love. And, in return, we can support some of these ideas. But we've also been deselected, and we have 320 million Americans with lots of guns and bullets, no retirement plan, and they're awfully upset too. So we do see 18, 19-year-olds seeing this kind of sexy, not only that, we run like military commercials nonstop in this country. So it's uber sexy to see this kind of thing out there where you can belong to something bigger than you that, as you point out rightly, Lydia Wilson, has meaning, or at least seems like it has meaning, if your own life has very little meaning.
Well, and also ISIS are very, very good at selling that meaning. We've seen their propaganda efforts have just been, we haven't begun to be able to match them. They are very good at reaching out individually to people. They can spot the early signs of a small amount of support for what they are trying to do. And people are there to reach out straight away to say, oh, brother, come and join us. Or, oh, sister, you're really thinking along the right lines, but have you thought about coming out to join us? And then people feel very flattered that they're being taken so seriously. They feel flattered that somebody's taking personal attention, and they get drawn into arguments or, discussions. And the discussions have a huge sort of, I hesitate to use the word logic because it's not a logic we recognize. But in a certain way, these arguments make a lot of sense. It really does make sense to a young, idealistic person who's not happy with their own society. And I wasn't at 15. I was very critical of my own country, and I still am, quite honestly. But they are being sold something that makes a lot of sense, and either that comes with the idea of building up a society, which a lot of the time that's the women that are being given that message, or it comes with this sense of real adventure and war and manliness and glory in war. And these narratives are very powerful, and we haven't found any way of reaching out so individualistically to people, and we haven't found a counter-narrative that even begins to combat it.
Lydia Wilson, Research Fellow, Center for the Resolution of Intractable Conflict, Harris Manchester College, University of Oxford. I want to thank you so much for joining us live from London, in the middle of the night for you anyway, here on GoHarrison. Really appreciate your generosity.
Thank you very much.